I'm calling to order the Tuesday, September 30th special meeting of the Township of South Orange Village Board of Adjustment. May we have a roll call?
Yes, Mr. Don.
Here.
Mr. Descala.
Here.
Mr. Polipiano.
Here.
Mr. Reeves.
Here.
Mr. Adler.
Here.
Mr. Shapiro.
Here.
And Mr. Breen.
Here.
Pursuant to Section 5, Chapter 231, PL 1975, this is to state for the record that adequate notice of this meeting has been provided to the public by posting on the bulletin board in Village Hall, the village's website, and the South Orange Maplewood News Record, and by filing said notice in the office of the village clerk. So the first order of business tonight, Mr. Breen, you have something to tell us?
Yes, in preparing for, in seeing the title of our thing, singular, I didn't connect that with AT&T. In reading the file today, I obviously see that it's AT&T. As an attorney, I represent AT&T, and they're a current and active client of mine. So given that, I've been advised by our attorney that that seems to be a fairly clear conflict, and I will be recusing myself.
Okay. Thank you. So we'll see you.
See you on Tuesday.
Yes. Okay, so what this means is we have 6 board members now. Obviously, that's a quorum. This is a D variance, so the applicant would need 5 votes. 7 are the voting members, as you know, and we wanted to ask you, do you want to continue?
Yes, we'd like to proceed tonight. The risk and if anything comes up, we can always adjourn and ask them to read the transcripts.
Okay. All right, so the first application this evening is Singular Wireless, AT&T. This is at 76 South Orange Avenue. Applicant is seeking permission to place telecommunications antennas and a generator on the roof above the building.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and everyone, thank you for your time tonight. I do appreciate it. For the record, my name is Christopher Quinn, Q-U-I-N-N, partner with the firm Pinellas Halpern, here representing New Singular Wireless, PCS LLC, which everyone knows in the marketplace and is mentioned by Mr. Bean, that known as AT&T. The property in question for tonight's application is 76 South Orange Avenue, Block 2007, Lot 4. As you may recall, back in August when we were here for completeness, we had some discussion that this property was previously identified as Lots 4 and 6. They were subsequently consolidated, and the township recognized this as only Lot 4 now. The property is located in the B2 zone within the Central Business District. Currently on the property, there is a office building. It's actually the location of the village's temporary municipal offices. There's also 3 other telecommunications carriers that are located on this rooftop: Sprint, Metro PCS, and Verizon. AT&T is tonight seeking approval to install a telecommunications facility of its own on this rooftop. We're proposing 12 antennas. All of the antennas will be enclosed within 2 screen enclosures on top of the penthouse. We're proposing indoor equipment inside the building, as well as for future generator to provide us with temporary power within one of the antenna enclosures on the rooftop. It'll be a natural gas generator. AT&T is doing that throughout its entire network, as I'm sure everyone, being a former resident of Maplewood, during Sandy, I know some of my friends in South Orange were without power for 13, 15 days. I was without for 9 days. So I think that's the background of why we're proposing an emergency generator here on the site. The use is not permitted anywhere within South Orange, so we're seeking use variance. We also need a height variance as well here, and site plan approval. We have our standard witnesses. I think the board has heard a number of these applications in the past. Our civil engineer, Frank Pasden, will testify about the physical aspects of the design. We have Ronald Peterson, who's going to talk about the emissions aspect of the facility, how it will comply with all applicable standards. We have Neil Arcio, who's our radio frequency design engineer, who will talk about why we're here and actually what the need is and how the site will actually serve the community. And finally, our planner, Dave Carlback, which will talk about how the variance relief that's being requested, in his opinion, on whether or not the board can grant the requested relief. Also, just to note, Since we are locating antennas on an existing structure that already supports other facilities, this is a co-location, and there was recent federal legislation in 2012, Section 6409 of the Federal Middle Class Tax Relief and Job Creation Act of 2012. That was also adopted, which further supports this application, but I'd submit to the board. In fact, that legislation says that a government approval is required as long as the proposed modification doesn't result in a material change to the physical dimensions of the building. But like I said, I think this application is a fairly strong application. I think it fits in nicely with the neighborhood. The antennas will not be visible from anywhere as we're concealing everything. But if there's no other questions, I can start with my civil engineer, Mr. Paz.
So, Mr. Quinn, just a matter of housekeeping on the application. It's been noted that there is a signature needed for the owner certifying that you're allowed to bring the application, and it says, I believe it says, proceed the proposed lease agreement, so I'm assuming you're relying upon the lease as authorizing you to bring the application.
Yes, that is correct.
And does the lease also authorize you to place a lien on the property, because that's part of our owner certification?
I'm not aware to about placing lien on the property.
I noticed that also our application asks you to certify, the applicant to certify that all fees will be paid. Will the applicant be willing to state for the record that it will make sure all fees are paid,
Yes.
escrows, et cetera, prior to the issuance of a resolution if needed?
That's fine.
Are we paid within 15 days of notice? And
That's
the
acceptable.
applicant will make that representation?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. I'll give Mr. Pasman this.
And let me remind y'all, you need to speak directly into the microphone at all times.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony that you give here this evening is the whole truth?
Yes, I do.
Please state your name and address for the record.
It's Frank Pazden, P-A-Z-D-E-N. I'm with Mazer Consulting at 400 Valley Road, Mount Arlington, New Jersey. I'm the licensed professional engineer that prepared the plans that are for this application tonight.
And you're a civil engineer with Mazer?
Yes, that's correct.
Mr. Passon, can you provide the board with an overview of your educational background and professional experience, please?
Yes, I received my Bachelor of Science in Professional Engineering from Purdue University. I have over 16 years' experience in civil engineering and structural design with a emphasis in telecommunications and structures. I've participated in the design of over 1,500 telecommunication sites throughout that time period. I've testified throughout the state of New Jersey before boards and have been accepted as an expert in each case and have testified before probably approaching 100 at this point.
And your license is still current?
Yes, that's correct.
That's been Mr. Passon as a civil engineer.
We have any questions for Mr. Paston? Okay, the board recognizes you as an expert in civil engineering.
Thank you.
Mr. Passon, do you have a mounted copy of the site plans that were submitted as part of this application with you?
Yes, I do.
And is there any changes in those plans from what the board should have?
No, this is the same set that was submitted. These are dated September 8th, 2014, Rev 1, revised per engineer's comments.
And those were revised pursuant to not only the review letter we received from Allen Engineering back in July, but also from the completeness meeting that was conducted by this board in August.
That's correct.
Since there's no change to the plan, is the board's practice for us to mark this as an exhibit, or is it okay if we, that it remain unmarked?
We're going to remain unmarked.
Okay. Mr. Patterson, can you please describe the characteristics of the subject property, the existing improvements on the site, as well as what AT&T is proposing as part of this application?
Yes, just one question. Is it okay if I move this forward, or is this for the camera, set for the camera?
You want to move it forward a couple feet?
Yeah, just so I could kind of get out to...
It's okay if he moves it forward a couple feet, yes.
All right, be easier for me to explain this way. Okay, the existing facility, as it was mentioned, is an office building currently located at between Valley Street to the east, a little south of South Orange Avenue, and then to the, Valley Street is to the west, Academy Street to the east, South Orange Ave to the north, and then the bottom part of the property is kind of closed in by First Street. You are familiar with the property and that the south section of the property has a parking structure for the office building, and then the building itself is really almost up to the lot lines of the north, east, and west. As it was mentioned, our application is to put the antennas on the building and our equipment on the inside of the building. So we will not be having any kind of disturbance to the property itself. So what I want to show you is the overall roof plan. So this is sheet Z3 from what was submitted, and this kind of gives an enlarged view of the roof plan so that we can describe what we're proposing. The facility will have 3 antenna sectors, and each sector contains 4 antennas, so we're proposing a total of 12 antennas. Currently, the existing co-locators are mounted around the perimeter of the mechanical penthouse that's on the rooftop. The reason we can't do the same thing is because of the location that our sectors are required. There are existing antennas already in those places. So what we have proposed is to locate our antennas actually above the top of the penthouse, and in doing so, we will screen them in these 2 enclosures. So the enclosure that's off towards the southeast will have what is our beta sector, and that would also have what would be our future generator. That'll be completely enclosed in a fiberglass wall panel system that will match the existing facade of the penthouse below. The enclosure to the northwest will have the other 2 antenna sectors, and again, it would be completely enclosed so that you would not see any of the antennas from the street view. Our equipment will be mounted within that penthouse. That penthouse is a mechanical penthouse. There's air handling equipment, things of that nature in there, and that is also where the other co-locators' equipment are. Our equipment will be within basically similar to what the other carriers have. They have fenced-off compartments inside that penthouse. So Verizon, Metro PCS, and Sprint are there. We're just going to fence off basically our lease area to have small equipment cabinets located inside. And then basically from the equipment cabinets, our antenna cables will be routed up through the roof of the penthouse, so you won't see anything exposed on the outside. And they're routed across the roof from one enclosure to the other in an enclosed cable tray. That cable tray sits on sleepers slightly above the rooftop. So it's an unmanned facility. It will only require electric and telephone for the running of the telecommunications site, and the generator will be natural gas. It does not require any water or sewer. Typically, it's visited on the average of once every 4 to 6 weeks by a technician, and they just use like a typical SUV vehicle, so they would utilize parking that's on site when they come and visit. That's really...
There's no lighting proposed as part of this application?
That's correct.
And because we'll be on the rooftop and within the penthouse, we're not proposing to interfere with any of the tenancies within the building.
Correct.
The gas generator will comply with all applicable standards?
Yes.
And also, you mentioned before that the antennas and the future generator will be fully enclosed, so it won't be visible. Around this property, the topography does slope in this area. Even with this change in topography, still no one will be able to see AT&T's antennas or the generator. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So the testimony that testimony is that, is it from that a pedestrian on the street, line of sight, doesn't allow you to see the structure you're adding to the roof?
There will be some photo sims that will demonstrate a little better of the view that you'd see from the street. Our elevations on the drawings are more, if you're hovering, looking kind of directly at the building, so they're a little bit more of what you would, not really what you would see from walking on the road.
I think that
You-
the point is that you'll see the enclosure,
Yes.
you won't see the actual
Right.
antennas.
And we're not proposing just as sometimes you might see is one side or two sides of the enclosure. They'll be fully enclosed.
Because of the way that it is, you know, that you can see the building as you're coming down the hills. That's why we wanted to do the enclosure on all four sides, so that it wasn't that you were just on one facade blocking the antennas. This way it will cover it from the back as well.
So if someone's coming from Academy, they're not going to be able to see the antennas,
Correct.
where they wouldn't see from South Orange. It won't be visible from anywhere.
Correct.
There was a couple of comments from the board engineer's review letter. One asked about the zoning table and the maximum lot coverage. It's saying that the lot coverage was changed, or was unchanged, even though we did add the two lots together. We'll revise that number, is that?
That's correct. The revised number will be 88.6%.
And again, that's an existing condition which we're not further exasperating.
That's correct.
Secondly, number 3 talks about the building elevations to the southwest and northeast. Can you just touch upon that with the?
Yes, the question that was brought up was that we didn't show the stairs appropriately in all directions going into the different enclosures on the rooftop. And he is correct with that in that if you look at the northeast elevation that's on sheet Z4A, for example, there will be stairs with a handrail that access the enclosure, and we show that on the northeast elevation. We failed to show that on some of the other elevations, like on the looking southeast. There may be some additional handrail on that drawing elevation that would need to be shown. So again, we will update these elevations, but it's similar to what we were talking about as far as what your view will be from the street will still be presented in the photo sims. So that should be clarified.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Okay. Who wants to start? Mr. Shapiro, you look like you have a question.
Yes. Will there be possible incidents where you might need access to the facility when the building is completely closed?
They do make an arrangement with the building owner to be able to access the rooftop. I don't know what their arrangement's going to be in particular for this facility.
No, I mean, the normal arrangement is that they're only going to access it for maintenance during normal business hours. If there is an emergency, there's a phone number to call, or the lease provides mechanisms for the ways they can get access into the building.
I see.
And we don't expect any kind of interference with any tenants, though.
And the typical maintenance that I talked about on the 4 to 6 week interval is during business hours.
It might require someone to go to the equipment, change out certain software, certain pieces of the computer equipment, or get access to the antennas. But that would essentially be it.
Could there be situations where there might be emergency repairs or access needed at night when you would need to put on spotlights or lights in order to be able to see what you're doing?
I guess, depending on what the situation was, it would be probably rare that they would have to work on the antennas at night. Their equipment's accessible inside the building if they would have to do work, inside the building for some emergency on their equipment. But I don't think there would be any times that they would have to be doing work on antennas themselves.
And quite frankly, even in that event, again, everything would be within that enclosure. So theoretically, the light would be in an enclosure. So.
Mr. Adler?
So what's the equipment that's going to be in the building? What equipment?
So with the different telecommunication sites, each carries a little bit different. For AT&T, they'll have an arrangement of approximately 5 equipment cabinets that houses their radio equipment. It's their power cabinet. It's just what basically powers their antennas. Like I said, it only needs electric and telephone service. We'll have a separate electric service for the AT&T facility, so there'll be an electric panel and a telco panel, and then just their radio cabinets basically on site.
Essentially, the antennas receive signals and then go into the equipment, and then the equipment sends those signals into the switch.
How big are these cabinets?
Excuse me?
How big are the cabinets, the
How
5
big? The cabinets themselves, they are approximately 30 inches by 30 inches, 6 feet tall. And some are smaller. Some, they range a little. There's a smaller one as well. It's like 27 by 27. It sits on a plinth, and it's about 30 inches tall.
Do they vibrate or make any noise?
No, and the generator will have vibration isolators installed.
But the generator is only for emergencies, correct?
Correct.
Mr. Paston, I'm interested to know about these 2 runes that you've created on top of the buildings. There's already a penthouse there, and that's required a height variance, and this board has approved the previous application, so this isn't the first time. And those other applicants, as you said, have put it on that so-called penthouse. What I'm referring to, the 2 runes are the 2 additional boxes that you've said that are required because the existing antennas occupy sectors where your antennas are required. So you're using that as justification to go up yet an additional 10 feet. So tell us more about why that is actually required in ways that we can understand it, and why you can't just do it just like all your competitors have done and put it on the existing penthouse.
Sure. With there's required separation distances from the various carriers. So typically, as you're going up vertically, it's a typical 10-foot separation distance. And as well as horizontally, you can't just put the 2 antennas right next to each other. So if you see on sheet Z3 on the roof plan, we actually show around the perimeter where the existing antennas are located. And you can see, if you start at our alpha sector, that there are antennas located directly below our proposed sector. Now, we can't just go directly to the east of them, or which would be to the right on the page, because that's going to put us so that we're going to be too close to the, there's not enough room of separation to go between the 2 other carriers. Same thing that happens on the gamma sector in that location. You can see there's
Okay, see, you're using words like, Greek things like gamma. Yeah,
right. I'm sorry. It's designated on the drawing gamma sector, which is pointing towards the west. And what that location is in the northwest corner of the penthouse. There are 4 existing co-locator antennas directly in that location on the wall. If you go towards the south along that penthouse wall, again, there's another section of co-locator antennas. So there's just not adequate space to install our proposed antennas within the layout of all the other antennas that are up there. So this, as you look around the penthouse wall, basically occurs at each location where we need. And the sectors that I talk about, the radio frequency engineer can talk about a little bit further, but that's the direction that the antennas are pointing. So he'll show you why that's required.
So there's a directionality to these antennas?
Yes, that's correct.
So you can't just put them on facing north or south? They can't all just face in one direction?
No, that's correct. The way that their azimuths are designed ties into their network, which the radio frequency engineer will explain a little bit further.
And the issue is that they interfere with the other antennas. So if we put them at the exact same height, and locking right next to the other antennas, they'll interfere and no one will have service. None of the antennas will function properly.
Okay, is that testimony?
I will have our radio frequency engineer confirm that.
Okay.
It's just, honestly, we're kind of getting to another area of expertise as well. It's kind of blending between these.
Because this is my principal concern about the whole application. We've approved these pretty seamlessly in the past, but I am concerned, that is this a competitive advantage that you're securing by height, for example? Does that have something to do with the radio frequency, that height matters as far as communication to the cell units or to other towers?
Again, that's something that the radio frequency engineer can explain to you, but it would be an easier application if we could just build on the side of the wall. That would be our preference if that was possible, but in this case, based on the layout, this is what we had to come to.
Well, because it looks like there's space a little bit more towards the to the east of where there's no antennas on that spot. At least it looks that way. And then on the other side, on the I guess the other side towards the interior of the roof, there are no antennas there. That's just not feasible to put those on the current penthouse?
It's going to be it's going to be a mixture that.
Yeah, right there, put some there.
Right.
And then on the other side.
Well, so, for example, if you were able to locate something in this area, you're still going to need something to screen the gamma sector. So, which is the sector pointing towards 300 degrees towards the west. So again, this type of enclosure isn't going to be able to just go away. We have the access door to the penthouse as well to contend with there. So that was based on what we laid out.
Did you look at the possibility of expanding the existing penthouse further to give yourself wall space for mounting antennas?
At that existing roof level, no, we didn't per se look to add an addition to the penthouse at that same level. The issues that would again happen though are that the co-locator antennas are occupying our space even at that roof level. So if we built something out, we would be blocking their signal.
So
So you have antennas here from another carrier?
Yeah.
Right?
Yes,
So we can't bump out the penthouse and block the other carrier signal.
that's correct.
And on the other side of it, there's HVAC equipment that's right there, which we couldn't just bump out the bottom of the penthouse, or I guess the southern portion of the penthouse. If we're over there, because there's HVAC equipment that's there.
And that's correct. And the other thing you may have seen on other buildings around is sometimes the antenna is not necessarily flush mounted to the building wall, but on like a ballast frame or something like that. Again, the issue that happens there is because all the other co-locators are back on that penthouse wall, locating something out in the field of the roof would block their signal.
Right. Couple of things. First of all, make sure to use your microphone. And secondly, why not locate on another roof? I mean, this is like an apartment building that you can't add any more apartments to, and you're asking to add another level to the apartment building so you can add apartments. So why not go somewhere else?
And we'll be able to address that with the radio frequency testimony.
Okay. And I guess one other question for me is I know that you're building to standards with regard to putting an emergency generator on the roof, but it's a natural gas power generator that no one will be really responsible for except for when visits, right, every couple of weeks to check on and service the equipment, the other equipment. So what mechanisms are you going to have in place to identify if there's a gas leak or something like that can alert authorities?
The equipment itself, as well as the generator, are all monitored 24/7 from a remote location. It's monitored for intrusion or any kind of alarms that would go off, either the equipment cabinets for heat sensors, for example, the generators. The generators themselves are also remotely exercised on a biweekly basis, and that time when they are exercised can be scheduled. So it could be, in the morning or after work hours. That can all be arranged. But so those types of things are monitored, and the equipment is kept up to date for maintenance like that.
So is there a sensor that would detect gas leak specifically?
I would have to.
Or a fire, or?
There is fire and, fire intrusion. That is, I would have to get you exact information on a gas leak sensor.
Okay.
We have other questions?
So, just to clarify, your testimony is that these antennas cannot be located anywhere else on the building without going up. Is that correct? That's your testimony?
As a combination of, due to the location of the existing co-locators, keeping in mind where they are and what our proximity would have to be mounting to them, yes, this is where we would need to be located.
These are the only places?
Yes.
How many antennas are on there now?
Total on the building?
Mm-hmm.
I don't have the exact count, but it's,
Or is that for a different witness? I mean,
well, the different antennas are the existing co-locator antennas, the Verizon, Metro PCS, and Sprint. So the number of antennas that were installed at the time,
It's all those little dots that are popping out.
On the outside of the building? Right?
Yeah.
at the time of our visit, there were 21 antennas installed. And I say, the reason I say it was at the time of our visit is because this industry has been a very evolving with technologies. So in some cases, some carriers may have taken down antennas, other cases they may have added antennas. So I don't know if that is the exact count of 21 right now, but those antennas are representative of their space that they have to install and where they are currently installed.
and your visit was when? The visit you're talking about? The date of your visit that you're referencing?
I will have to get you the date. I don't have it off the top of my head.
How many antennas are you proposing again?
12. 4 per sector.
So your sectors are beta, alpha, and gamma.
Yes.
Couple questions?
Sure.
So on your sheet Z3, the one we're looking at now, the beta sector's shooting southeast, correct?
Yes.
More or less.
Yes.
Just to sort of kick around an idea, if the south...
Your mic isn't picking up.
Oh, okay, sorry. If the southwest corner of the penthouse, where your note says existing co-locator antenna flush mounted to penthouse wall,
Yes.
if a section of, let's just say, a wall, a piece of penthouse wall extended down from there, a little bit at an angle, so it cleared that mechanical equipment, because you probably need a couple feet around that mechanical equipment. And you extended it 15 feet at the same height as the existing penthouse, just the framework. It doesn't have to be enclosed. It gives you a wall to attach to. Would that location satisfy what you needed for the antennas at that section? I'm not talking about the enclosure to handle the generator at this point.
It actually takes another step beyond that, just the physical location, because of where they're trying to direct the antenna coverage. And you have the church up to the east there, and how they're trying to direct that coverage, we would have to discuss to see if that location would work exactly. Physically extending the wall there and possibly locating antennas there, could be an alternative, but it would have to work in concert with the location that the antenna signal needs to go as well, with the interference in the area.
And same concept on the other side. I guess that doesn't address your alpha sector. The alpha sector is really the one that where you don't have any place to mount, right?
Right, the alpha sector, the antennas are directly below, and there's not enough space to the east to mount between.
I mean, I think you understand the concern. The concern here is that we now have a penthouse that has a penthouse. And, you know, we have these, and I know you're not testifying to it, but we have these visual images that very accurately show how awful that's going to look. And I think to say that it doesn't have a visual impact is not true. So I'm just trying to figure out, is there a way on this roof to satisfy the space locations you need without having to build up? Because I think the existing penthouse sits back off the face of the building, so it's, while you do see it, it's not right in your face. But with these things being 10 feet higher, I think they're really going to be in your face. But I would like to also hear as to why this location has to be the location. There's other tall buildings in downtown South Orange.
And we'll be able to give you a little more information of how the site was selected and what the coverage would be.
And then I think you alluded to it, a location on one area of the building, does it really make that big a difference if they were located 15 or 20 feet away, separate on another, down the length of the building? Can't imagine, I'm not an engineer, but given the distance that these waves are traveling, that 20 feet is going to make any bit of difference.
The difference is just the way that the azimuths are selected and the areas that they're selected to be directed towards. It can make a difference that if you move down to the end of the building and we build a structure somewhere else, that doesn't work because of some blockage across the road. Those are things that are looked at when we're out there. But again, it's kind of a thing that works between myself and what the radio frequency expert will explain what's needed for picking the locations. So this, like I said, wasn't really what we wanted to have to do here either, but based on the arrangement of the roof and what their needs were, that's what the design required.
One thing I'd just like to clarify that while Mr. Pazin was testifying, there was a question about other antennas that are on the penthouse. One thing I'd like to clarify to the board is that frequently carriers will get approval for a certain number of antennas. They'll install a portion of them and reserve the extra one for the future or something to that effect. Verizon has approval for 12 antennas. I know that Sprint has approval for 6 antennas. Metro PCS, I didn't see the number in that resolution.
You need to make sure you speak into the microphone.
I did not see that number that was into that resolution of specific number of antennas. I'd have to examine their plans, but oftentimes their antennas are 9 antennas with their installation. So if you're looking at 9 plus 12 plus 6, you're looking at 27 antennas. Even if 21 are there now, there could potentially be 27 from other carriers.
So how many are you actually going to install if this application is granted?
Ours is, the design is for 12 antennas.
So you're going to actually install 12?
Yes.
So if your counsel says that often you reserve antennas, you get approval for X number, but you don't need that right now, you're leaving yourself no leeway? You don't need that?
Well, our design, I don't understand, need what?
Okay. Your counsel said that often, as is the case here, apparently on the not your application, prior applications, you get approval for more antennas than you currently need because you may need more later. At least that's what I understood your counsel to say after he discussed something with one of your people. But AT&T is not reserving any antennas or any ability to build any further antennas.
Beyond 12, that's correct.
Invariably, based upon my experience, AT&T and Verizon will build out their full 12 antennas. It's the other carriers that often will go in for initial approval, then come in subsequently to that and ask to amend their approval and ask for additional antennas. For years, I've worked on T-Mobile applications where an initial installation had 6 antennas, and I had to go back in front of a board to seek approval for 12 antennas.
Well, but that's the reverse. That's the
I
reverse.
said, no, I'm saying, yeah, where they initially had 6 antennas, or they did getting 12 antennas, but there were 6 where they had to. In some cases, it was 6 where they had approval for 6, they had to go back and get subsequent approval for 12. In other cases, they had 12, they had the right for 12, they only installed 6, and they subsequently built, amended their site to install the additional 6.
Okay.
I guess to ask a different way, could AT&T install fewer antennas and make something work without the height?
The height itself is something that, is really still, it's going to be, if there's one antenna, that's, unless you're talking about somewhere else located. The minimum,
I think we know where the board's going with this right now, and I certainly, can you say with certainty at this point that we've looked at every single option here to put the antennas at the height of the current penthouse?
yes.
Okay, because I was, because I think what we're going to do is we're going to take one more look and go back out with our experts again and see if there's any way we can accommodate the board. We hear what the board's concerns are. I think we're going to go back to see what we can do, if anything. If we can eliminate one penthouse for you to do something that might help with your concerns here, we will work with the board. Okay? But that was the conversation. What I'd like to do now, if there's no other questions from Mr. Pasden, we can have him finish his testimony or answer any questions from the board or any further questions from the public that may not have been asked at this point. Subsequently, that we'll have a couple other witnesses just to provide some of our testimony, our missions testimony, our testimony about the need for the site and why we're actually proposing this site. And then we can go from here and hopefully be adjourned to another date to give us time to go back and reevaluate everything on this property.
That sounds reasonable. I think Mr. Keller had a question.
Yeah, just one. Just want to make it clear, obviously, from what you've discussed so far, is that the existing penthouse, the structure as it exists today, really doesn't afford any opportunities for any new antennas at the existing limitations of that structure, correct?
Based on our configuration of antennas that we have here.
Okay. But there are other areas on the roof that physically can accommodate other enclosures at the same level as the existing penthouse, or a similar level.
It would
Putting aside what the RF engineer would say, physically, is there other space on the roof that it could accommodate another penthouse or two?
yes, as it was brought up, that we could look into some other areas to the south, and we'd have to also check, to make sure we don't interfere with any co-locator line of sight.
Okay. And there's no physical constraints on the roof? One area of the roof is the same as another area of the roof, as far as you know?
I mean, a structural analysis would be completed, but for the most part, yes, the construction is the same, yes.
Okay, and there's no limitations, and this is probably more for Mr. Quinn, there's no limitations from a lease perspective as to where on the roof you put this?
We certainly will have to get our landlord's approval of any antennas and any change in the design, but that would be something we'd have to go and further investigate, provided it's feasible from the technology perspective, feasible from the practical civil design aspect, and also from the leasing ability. Quite frankly, from any site, it has to work for the technology, it has to be leasable, and it has to be buildable from those two things, and it has to be zonable. So it's making all those work together.
Understood. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
I had one, just one.
Mr. Adler?
Just to clarify for anybody watching at home or for anybody up here, co-locator means antenna?
I'm sorry, a co-locator is the fact that there are other companies, we call it like Verizon, Metro PCS, Sprint, they're considered co-locators. So when we call out an existing co-locator antenna, it's one of their antennas.
Antennas?
Yes.
Okay.
I think it's appropriate to say it's an antenna from another carrier.
I understand.
So, and one of the benefits is that, I think one of the benefits from a planning perspective that this application has and that the carrier's done is that they locate antennas in one location where they can and utilize that one location as opposed to putting antennas on every building in town. And I think there's certain planning benefits to that, and in fact, the MLUL 2 years ago when it was amended in section 46.2 acknowledged that in terms of co-locations where if there was certain mechanisms where expedited review can happen for certain types of these types of co-locations, acknowledging those kind of benefits and that kind of priority.
In the history of our approvals, agrees with that, and we've got 3 companies there already, so we're not averse to that.
The existing penthouse was built by the building owner and then leasing space within that to each of the carriers?
Yeah.
And your proposed addition would be built by the building owner and then leased to you?
No, this would be constructed by the contractors for AT&T.
Pardon my engineering ignorance, but are there any circumstances where the location of antennas could possibly result in one antenna interfering with another?
That's the issue that we were, in our layout, our current design layout, we were trying to avoid as far as interfering with the other companies' antennas that are currently mounted on the penthouse. That's what brought us up to the roof. And then as far as how our antennas are laid out themselves, you just have similar spacing between each of our individual antennas so they don't interfere with each other.
So it's possible then that the locations of the antennas is a critical issue?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, no further questions from our board members? Go ahead.
Just one follow-up. On the penthouse itself, right now there's 21 antennas, and I think the testimony was that there's the possibility that there's an approval existing for an additional 9 antennas. Is that correct?
What I represented was that there's approval for additional 6.
Okay.
Not from another carrier, but Sprint was approved for 6 antennas. It may appear that there's only 3 there, something to that effect.
Okay. So I think it may be helpful as you go back and reevaluate the penthouse to find out exactly what's approved already, and then if you could maybe enlighten us as to what the requirements are. You've indicated there's not enough room up there, but are there certain spacing requirements, horizontal and vertical, that you could provide to us so we could evaluate whether we could fit more antennas in that area?
Sure, and that's actually what the radio frequency engineer, that's part of his testimony as well. So you'll hear that tonight just from another witness.
Okay, and just one final question. You've talked about the screen, and we have, I have looked at the photo simulations, and maybe it's another witness who's going to talk to this, but I at least would like a little more information on what exactly, if we go back to that scenario, what that's going to look like, the material, the color. Is it translucent? Is it opaque? Just a little more information on that, because it's kind of difficult looking at the plans to see what that looks like.
Sure, and we could actually, so we'll be back, come up with a sample if we have to come back with the.
Thank you.
Sorry, one other thing that just, it may be helpful. I know the photo simulations have given a indication of what the enclosures would look like from the street level. It may be helpful for the board when they're looking and saying, why can't you be over here, is to have some photographs from the roof as to what potential obstructions or constraints there are as to, if I'm here, what do I say? Obviously, it may be difficult for you to get 12 feet up above the roof to take a photo where these penthouses are, but to have something from other areas to give a indication as to what constraints there are for your antenna directions.
Okay, yes.
Okay, do members of the public have any questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you. Next, we'll call up Ronald Peterson, who will talk about the emissions aspect of this project.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you'll give to this board is the whole truth?
I do.
Please state your name and address for the record.
Name is Ronald Peterson, Petersen. Address is 170 Fairview Drive, Bedminster, New Jersey.
Mr. Peterson, can you give the board the benefit of your professional educational background, please?
Yes, I have a Bachelor of Science in Electrical Engineering and a Master's in Electrophysics from what was Brooklyn Polytech and is now NYU Polytech. I retired from Bell Labs in Murray Hill 13 years ago. I worked there a little over 40 years. The last 30 years in an environmental health and safety center where I managed the wireless and optical technology safety department. During that time, we've made countless measurements on systems such as this in the field trials until recently. I also chair a number of committees, including the one that developed the safety limits that are in the American National Standards, an American National Standard for safety limits. And I chair an international committee for the assessment of human exposure to radio frequency energy from various devices, including antennas, such as these.
So Mr. Peterson is an expert in radio frequency emissions.
Do we have any questions for Mr. Peterson? Okay, we recognize you as an expert in radio frequency emissions.
Thank you very much. Mr. Peterson, you've reviewed the proposal by AT&T with respect to any emissions generated by this project, is that correct?
Yes, I have.
And do you have an opinion as to whether this project will comply with all applicable federal and state emission standards?
Yes, it will. That will include AT&T plus the existing antennas that are now up there. The maximum signal strength at anywhere, and we usually do it at 6 feet and 16 feet above grade, which would be outside of the windows of a second floor of a nearby building or so. And we find that for AT&T plus the 3 other carriers that are up there, the maximum signal strength will be less than 20% of the FCC safety guidelines. And the one thing we found out over the years in making measurements and comparing the measured values with calculated values, the model that we use is very conservative. It overestimates the actual signal strength by quite a bit. And since it's a safety calculation, you have the luxury of just adding all the uncertainties in one direction to maximize the signal strength. We find that when you do make comparisons that the actual levels are anywhere from 3 to 10 times below what the predicted levels are. And that's been consistent for measurements on rooftops, for antennas on towers, for antennas on the sides of buildings, for just about everywhere we made measurements over the years.
And you've actually, your findings are contained within a report dated September 26, 2014, is that correct?
Yes, it is.
I'm going to mark this as an Exhibit A1 for the board. It's a report.
Make sure you're talking into the microphone.
It's a report titled by R.C. Peterson Associates, LLC, entitled Site Conformity Assessment with FCC Rules and Regulations, 47 CFR, Section 1.1310, et cetera. Radio frequency emissions, prepared for SmartLink, and again, it's dated September 26, 2014. I'll provide it to the board right now. Seeing that we'll be back, it's on your packages. We'll provide additional copies of this to the board so you'll have it for the next meeting with any questions.
So we don't have that.
You do not have that. You have a report that was prepared by Neil Arceo entitled Radio Frequency Electromagnetic Energy dated June 30th by Neil Arcio. This is an additional report that Mr. Peterson prepared, since he was going to testify, he prepared his own report in advance of the meeting.
So do we mark that?
That was submitted?
This was submitted with our initial application.
The first
Yes.
one was, this one, the one that,
Not the new one, just
not
that
that
one.
one, right.
Yes, that was submitted with our initial filing.
Okay.
And Mr. Peterson, have you reviewed this previous report from June 30th, 2014?
I have, yeah.
And under both reports, the site will comply fully with all FCC and state emissions requirements.
Yes.
Excuse me, could you speak a little slower? Counsel, I just didn't get it.
Sure. And both reports, and your opinion is that the site will comply with all emission standards?
Yes, it will.
And even just with cumulatively with all the carriers, is that correct?
Yes. For AT&T plus Verizon, Sprint, and other carrier, Metro, PCS.
Okay, I have no further questions.
Of the 20%, up to 20% that the carriers provide in the aggregate of the allowable limit, what percentage of that is attributable to this particular application?
It's in your report.
Yeah. No, I'm sorry, what?
You said that in the aggregate, the carriers only emit up to 20% of the allowable limit. What percent of that is attributable to this application?
How much of the 20% is AT&T?
Oh, 9%. Yeah. At 16 feet above grade, at 6 feet above grade, it's about 6%. So it's about half. And again, it's an overestimate. And if you, in a report, it goes through all the assumptions we made to ensure that that it is an overestimate, that no one's going to be able to go out and make measurements and come anywhere near this value.
Do the frequency emissions vary based on the number of phone calls being made or the usage on the networks?
Yeah, the output power would vary a little bit, but we assume that the transmitters operate at maximum power all the time. So that would, in full capacity, and that's an overestimate, but it's for safety analysis, it's a great thing to do.
I know we probably ask this question every time we get one of these applications. The emissions are directional, correct? In other words, they're not going in, they're not smart enough to go back into the window of the office space directly below where the antennas are, correct?
No, it's directional. If something scatters off a building across the street, it would reflect back,
Right.
but it'd be at a much, much lower level
Right, but
because
it's
it's
not-
scattering all directions.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the worst case is 20%, that wouldn't be for people in the building on the top floor.
No, in the building, it's far lower than,
Right.
in any building, even if buildings across the street, it's lower than what it would be immediately outside, because even glass reflects some of the energy, and there is attenuation.
And there's no backflow in the antennas, like a cathode ray tube emits a lot of EMFs out the backside.
No, the amount directed backwards from the antenna is at least 1,000 times lower than what's directed forward.
So antennas don't have spherical emission, where you could put one up sort of like a microphone and the opposite of a microphone, and it goes out in all directions? That just doesn't exist?
No, the antennas are directionally have a fixed beam width in the horizontal and vertical planes, but they don't really change. It's determined by the mechanical structure of the antenna itself and how all the elements are arranged.
Okay, I'm not sure that answered my question. The reason I'm asking this, as naively as I am, is it's back to the idea of how to avoid an extra 10 feet onto the building and then having the next carrier come in and want an extra 10 feet and so on. Are there antennas that maybe are a little bit more expensive perhaps, that instead of being directional, radiate out like a sphere?
No, you don't want it radiate out as a sphere, because you want to use, it's structured in sectors, and each antenna covers a a sector and with certain, has certain characteristics that don't interfere with the other sectors and so forth. So you can increase the capacity of the whole site. If you had one cell like one antenna like the earlier ones, radiated in 360 degrees, but and say you could get 100 phone calls on that. Then if you break it up into sectors, into 3 sectors, and each one antenna only radiates into one sector, then you can get 300 phone calls. So you want the antennas to be fairly narrow beam. I mean, there's all kinds of antennas with all kinds of radiation patterns, and the radio frequency engineer could answer that better. But in my experience, the same types of antennas with the same horizontal and vertical beam width are used by most of the carriers.
Have other questions?
Are these antennas very weather sensitive?
Excuse me?
Are the output of the antennas weather sensitive?
No.
Mr. Peterson, I think you said that the percentage of emissions created by the AT&T antennas is different. The percentage is different at 6 feet and 16 feet.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Well, you're getting closer to the beam. As you go above grade, the beam is 10 degrees or maybe a little more in the vertical plane. And as you go up and up, you eventually get into the beam, and that's where it would be maximum. But most of the energy is directed forward, but some of it is directed downward. And the closer you get to the energy that's being directed downward, the higher the power density or the field strength.
But as a matter of percentage, AT&T's percent of emissions compared to the total percent of emissions, why isn't that a constant? Because the other carriers' antennas are also shooting beams, right? At roughly the same level.
Yeah, the percentage varies. And I mean, on distance from the antenna and elevation compared to the main beam of the antenna. What we're saying is that if you calculate what the signal strength is at one point, you get a number. You compare that with the FCC safety guidelines, and you get a percentage. Now, if you go up higher, closer to the main beam of the antenna, you get a higher number, which is a higher percentage of the FCC limits, and so forth. It's just that the field strength or the signal strength is not constant with distance.
I understand that. I'm not asking about the percentage of your signal compared to what's permissible. I'm asking about the percentage of your signal compared to all of the signals generated there by your antennas and the other antennas. I thought you said that changed depending on the height, 6 feet or 16 feet.
Yeah, well, the numbers in the report are calculated at 6 feet and 16 feet above grade. And at 16 feet above grade, it's about half of what the total is. It's half of what the 3 other carriers combined.
Right. Why does that percentage change? Why does that percentage change? Why is it half of what the other carriers are doing at one level, but a smaller
different number of transmitters, different power levels, and different antennas. Are you asking why it changes with distance, or why it's different at a given distance from the other carriers?
At a given height. Why the percentage of your carrier, your antenna's emissions is different at different heights when compared to the other antennas?
Maybe you can refer to the specific numbers that...
I don't know.
Well, I think the answer to the question has to do with each company's antennas have different characteristics. And so the way the strength of their signal would vary at different heights is going to be different for each carrier's antennas.
Is that
and
the
they all
answer?
operate at different frequency bands, is that correct?
They do, and but they also operate at different power levels and so forth. But the point is that where we calculate the maximum signal strength at a given distance, that's what it is. And if you go lower or higher, it changes. Just like with an AM broadcast station, if you get further away from it, the signal gets lower.
But
it's not constant in space.
Your testimony is that at the maximum point, it's less than 20% of the allowable standard.
Yes, that's for AT&T plus the other
Right,
carriers.
for all the carriers that are up there.
Yes.
So the question that I have is along the same line as what Bob's asking, but not related to height so much, is that there's a difference per antenna in terms of power
Yep.
strength. If everybody's total at 20% and the 12 antennas that are proposed by AT&T total at 9%, then they're more powerful antennas. Is that correct?
No, what we actually did was we calculate, well, first of all, there's 4 antennas per sector. So you only have to do it for one sector. It propagates out into a 40, 50, 60-degree beam in the horizontal plane. It doesn't propagate in 360 degrees.
So you did a measurement for each sector, is what you're saying? And each one was 20? Each one was 20% or lower than the FCC
No, the
standard?
total for each of the antennas. What we would do is the AT&T will have 4 different services or so. What you do is you calculate the maximum signal strength at 16 feet above grade for one antenna. Then you calculate it for the next antenna, which would have a different service on it. Then you calculate it for another antenna, which would have yet a different service on it. You do that for all of the AT&T antennas, and you add those numbers together, and that's where you get the 9% or so. You do the same thing for the other carriers, and you get approximately another 9%. So add all of them together for that one point in space, and that's where you get 20%.
Well, you can see where it appears that the AT&T numbers would be a higher number per antenna. If you did a per antenna number, it would be a higher number for AT&T antennas.
It'd be, well, not for a single antenna, but yeah, for the 4 antennas combined, what I'm saying is that would be slightly higher than what it would be for the other carriers, all their antennas
And
combined.
why is that? Is it because you're estimating what it would be with AT&T and you're taking an observed number for the other carriers? Is it because the AT&T is all LTE and the other carriers are wireless G, or I don't know?
Yeah, that's part of it. The ones that operate at lower frequencies, the exposure limits are more restrictive. So if it operates at 700 or below 700 or 700 megahertz, the exposure limits or the safety limits are more restrictive than at 1900 or 2300 megahertz. So it really depends on the frequencies, the output power, and everything else. But we have all that information, and that's what we use to calculate the maximum signal strength. And again, it's an overestimate. If you had an antenna in space and you walked with a probe, just walked out away from it, you'd see that the signal strength would go up, and it'd come back down, it'd go up, and it gradually could go down. Now, if you went to the next antenna at a different frequency, it'd do the same thing, but the peaks may not be in the same space, a distance from the antenna. We assume they all are, that they all add together. So it really is a...
Did you assume or measure for the other carriers? Did you take a measurement of
No, we didn't measure them. We have the data, but we've measured. We've worked for Verizon and all of them.
So you're assuming maximum output for each of the carriers, right?
You're assuming worst-case scenario for every single
Oh,
carrier?
yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Then why isn't it that they're all putting out the same amount? Or why
Because
does it
they all
appear to
operate at different output powers and at different frequency bands.
They're not all the same model.
They all have different services on them, yeah.
Right. So ostensibly, they will upgrade at some point and have the same level of output.
No, not necessarily. And in fact, if they have capacity problems and they have to build sites in between sites to get better coverage, then the power usually goes down.
Interesting, okay.
So just to clarify, I know you said 6 feet and 16 feet, and I guess those are important. But can you just say anywhere in the world, will all of the antennas on this property generate more than 20% of the allowable limit?
Yeah, that's what we always find when we do measurements and compare them with the calculated values. We look at everything, not just the antennas that we're measuring, but we look at broadcast band and everything else, and usually there's something else that dominates the environment, and it has nothing to do with the base station antennas, because they purposely operate at a very low power level. They're only meant to cover a small area, not a large area, as other antennas do. So what I'm saying is that with all the antennas in a neighborhood and all that, unless they're very close, the difference isn't going to be noticeable at all.
So with all of the antennas in the neighborhood, is there any place in South Orange that will experience emissions greater than 20% of the allowable limit?
I didn't see any antennas that were within a couple 100 feet of this site. And if that's the case, then no, it's not going to make any difference. There won't be, they'll just be insignificant.
Okay. And you also said that it depends on what services are on the antennas. What services are you putting on your antennas, and what services are on the other antennas?
Well, they're all different. You know, one is, some have cellular service, the old 850 megahertz service. Some have personal communicate. They're all different technologies. As far as the user, it doesn't make any difference. You know, the phone works, and it'll work off of any of the different services. But they're just the way the services are, the way the frequencies are modulated, and a bunch of other things that really has nothing to do with the maximum power or anything like that. It's just, you know, it's like listening to Channel 2 or Channel 4. They're different services, they're different frequencies, and everything's different.
You mean the service and frequency has no impact at all on emissions?
So
Is that what you're saying?
For this site, if you do the calculations at specific distances from this site or anywhere from the site, yeah, they all contribute. I'm not sure what your question is. The important thing is the output power and the antenna. And if you have the antenna characteristics and you know the output power, that's all you really have to know to calculate what the signal strength is.
I mean, I think, again, at the end of the day, with everything as worst-case scenario, you're talking about less than 20% of what the maximum is.
Yes.
So we more than comply. We comply by more than 5 times below what the standard is.
Yes.
And just to clarify, to help out, I think, this is only as generated through calculation from this particular location.
Yes.
There's no field measurements to understand cumulative effect.
No, we haven't made any, no. But, you know, we've made so many over the years that we know that the model that we use, which is a lot more conservative even in what the FCC recommends in its bulletin, that we're not going to come anywhere near, the measured values are not going to come anywhere near the calculated values.
Understood. Thank you.
I mean, if the board so required, we certainly can provide a post-construction measurements. However, I think Mr. Peterson's expert testimony is that it wouldn't make a difference, and would it probably come in below what the calculations have?
Oh, yeah, the measured values would certainly be below that, yeah.
Indulge my ignorance, but I seem to remember that years ago when cellular technology was first coming on stream, they used to make a rule that, or state that there was a rule that electrical magnetic impulse degrades by the square of the distance. Does that apply to this modern day technology?
Yeah, the field strength, yeah, it goes down as the square of the distance. So you double the distance, goes down by a factor of 4 times. So it goes down pretty quickly.
Is the highest place of emissions at the antenna, or is it somewhere else?
The highest place of the
greatest emission from an antenna, is it at the antenna, or is it 2 feet out?
Yeah, it's right in front of the antenna. At the same, yeah, so this would be at the same height as the antenna, directly in front of it, and fairly close to it.
Okay.
And as you move away from it, it decreases rapidly.
Okay.
No.
Members of the public have any questions? Thank you.
Okay, next we'll have our radio frequency design engineer, Neil Arcio. My reporter's asking if we take a 5-minute break.
Yeah, we can take we would take a break at 9 in any case, so this is just as well, we can take a break.
Great,
And
thank you.
We have, who's next?
I have our radio frequency expert who's next, our radio frequency engineer. He's going to testify. I think there's probably going to be some open issues, so I don't think he's going to give his full testimony tonight, but we'll wrap up with him, and then we can set a date when we can come back.
Okay, we're back in session. Mr. Quinn?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the time. I was conversing with our witnesses and our experts during the break. What I think it might be the most prudent to do, most efficient use of the board's time right now is if we end our application, our presentation tonight. As I mentioned before, I think I know the board is very clear about what your concerns are here. And before we go forward any further, I'd like to actually make sure we go back and look one more time to see if there's any way we can accommodate and address your concerns. So I think that would be the most prudent thing we can do without having to have you hear testimony that might be not applicable anymore, or might be changing as a result of any kind of design changes we can make. So with that, I'd actually like to close our application for tonight and then request that our application be carried to a date in the future.
Okay.
And if you have a calendar in terms of days, I know the board schedules, like back in August, I knew the university had a application that was ongoing, and that was kind of controlling your calendars, but.
Well, that's on hold for right now. So we have December open. Jetta?
What about November?
Oh, yeah, November. What am I thinking? There is November is between October and...
Yeah.
Well, November's always hard because of the league, and I think November would work great if there's space available on that agenda.
Right now, yes, November 3rd.
Yeah, there's nobody slotted. Okay, so you're first in line, November 3rd.
Great.
Is it the 4th?
It's the 4th. Yeah, it's November 4th.
No wonder there's nobody on the 3rd.
The 3rd's wide open.
All right.
November 4th. Okay, so we'll slot you all first up on November 4th at 7 p.m.
And notice will be carried, so we don't have to provide further notice of that hearing date. Is that?
Yes, this is notice that will be carried till November 4th. And if you're going to have new pictures or architectural renderings, please have them in to us. What is it? How many?
14.
14 days, 14 days before the hearing.
That's why it's the 3rd.
Good point.
What?
Yeah, November 4th is Election Day, and I think you're right, it would be then either the 3rd or the 6th typically we would move it to. What is our
No,
date?
I was in the wrong year, but it is the 5th.
It is the 3rd.
It is the
4th
November
is election
4th.
day.
It is. We meet on Election Day.
So,
That's weird.
That's why.
But people can't attend.
Is that right?
So we put in the resolution November 4th.
I guess it's November 4th. It's in it posted, published resolution.
Yeah, and that's what I wrote those down. That's what I have on mine. Okay. All right. Yes,
Yes.
here at SOPAC.
Great. And is the time still 7 p.m. or is it 7:30 for a regular scheduled meeting?
7 p.m.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much for your time tonight.
Thank you. Okay, so then other housekeeping matters. Next, this next Tuesday, we have the resolution. What is it? We have the minutes from the previous meeting, and then we have the resolution from South Orange Dental. Is that the one we need to approve? No, we've already
No,
done that
we
one.
already did that.
We already did that one. So,
Yeah, it would have been this
Just the minutes.
resolution, but
right, so then it's just minutes?
that's
we
it.
have to.
Oh, no, okay, so now what we should do is go over Bill Don's. If everybody likes Bill Don's, we'll approve those right here and right now.
Everybody likes Bill Dunn.
Bill Don made some
Well, I had some
useful
questions, too.
corrections. Let's do that right now, so we don't have
So
to
we
come
meet
back.
next week, right?
Yes. Okay, so.
Just an email from you, Bill.
Where did I put them? You have yours?
I have mine.
Okay, so Mr. Don made several corrections in red ink, and they are in our inbox. I've looked at them. I actually like them. Here they are. You can, let me, to remind you all, because I'm sure you've read them already. see if you have any questions.
Well, my only issue was with the interpretation for or, whatever, however you say that, manner.
Yeah, or a manner, about
Right.
conforming versus
Right,
non-conforming.
the whole discussion that we had with Mr. Renda as to whether this was a conforming or non-conforming use, I think we should, that paragraph is a little, to me, unclear, and I'd just like to go back to everybody's memory of what was, even though it doesn't read that way, Mr. Renda's feeling is that this is not a conforming use, or it was not a conforming use.
Right, and I think the resolution clarified that, and that we sidestepped
Right.
that whole issue. So our sidestepping in the resolution means we can sidestep it in the minutes.
Okay. Fine by me.
And then you had other,
Yeah.
more like word choice questions.
Yeah. Well, just some, some of the edits were just the way things were worded, but the second one was in the Seton Hall Mary Lawn application, when Janine Bauer got up and asked if Seton Hall would accept the condition on an approval if the report showed the house is structurally sound or made structurally sound. And I don't remember exactly what she was getting at, but I think I'd like to have that clarified. I think what she was getting at was, would they make some representation that the house would be retained if an engineering report was produced? I don't remember exactly where the wording was there. I mean, it may be all a moot point, but.
Well, but it also gets to the point that I've made several times over the years about how these minutes make me nervous, that there is a video of the meeting, and in fact, in this case, there's a transcript, because Seton Hall is paying to have a transcript produced, and I'd hate to see it, that the way something sensitive is characterized in a summary produced for minutes somehow calls into question the real record of the meeting. Right? And it's one of the reasons I wonder about why we put so much effort into minutes, because we have a record, it's a verbatim record, it's a video, you can even read people's expressions on their faces, and so I don't understand the purpose of the minutes, because what they could, to my mind, all they can do is make something less clear, not more clear.
Right, we've had that discussion many
Yes.
times over the years, and one of the things that I'll often bring up is that something that's done in other bodies is something called action minutes, where the only thing you write in the minutes are decisions that were made, or that kind of thing. Discussion. There was a discussion about, and the following action was made, and that's not uncommon. It's something that we don't do, but we could.
If there is a court action, and the court relies solely on the transcript.
Okay.
So that's what would be relied. Court would rely on the transcript if there was an appeal from the board's decision. It would not rely on the minutes. And if they conflicted, they would simply say the transcript rules.
Right.
So.
But what might happen in the future is somebody may make an application that, with respect to which this is relevant, they won't have the transcript. They probably won't even know about it, but they'll do some research and find the minutes. And they'll use that as the basis for something. I remember that we had raised this some earlier in my tenure as a member, and we had put in the minutes that they were subject to the transcript. I don't know when we stopped doing that, but I don't know. I guess
You're
Michael
right.
doesn't like that idea.
Right, that was your idea, actually. I remember that, yeah.
The one that Michael doesn't like.
That was, I believe, something the board had agreed.
That's correct, yeah.
So we should be doing that, Jetta.
Yeah, that is something that we decided upon, is that the minutes never were intended to be a transcript, a verbatim recording of what was said. They're meant to be a summary of what was said. And we did at some point have in there a statement, Jetta, that said these minutes are a summary. The actual statements can be found on the video.
Well, then maybe to what Mr. Polipiano is saying, and what Mr. Descala is saying, maybe the minutes should really be a listing of
Yeah.
the Seton Hall application was heard, and that evening, X, Y, and Z witnesses provided testimony. It just sort of then gives a list, and if you really want to know, then you could go look at the tapes. or-
And with maybe.
Because this makes me a
expanded
little
to
nervous,
include
just because
discussions.
I don't remember.
It always makes me nervous, because anytime you try to summarize something,
You
you
characterize it.
naturally take some things out, put some things in, put a spin on it, that's what you do. right?
Now, in this case, you're right, we have a transcript, because they're paying to
There's
have a
even, guys,
transcript.
Matt, there's a video and a transcript
Right.
in this case.
Well,
Of course, we don't have the transcript.
Right.
We have a video. We've gone
hope
over
we never
this
do.
time and time again. Everybody gets nervous, and we say it's a summary. The statement should go back in there that this is a summary. It's not a verbatim transcript. I've gone so far as to say, why do we do this at all if we have a video?
And then our
And then I
lawyer
think
tells us.
that you say that we have to, as I
I think
recall.
it's, that, not only that, I think it's important that there be some summary. I know oftentimes when I'm writing the resolutions, the minutes are available, they help me remember what was said. So, in that way, I think, and also for future uses, as Mr. Adler's pointed out, they can be helpful for someone. But they are not, they don't make me nervous insofar as that they're not binding.
Okay, so that sort of should assuage our anxiety as far as litigation. So that's why I've always been comfortable with a certain, sloppiness is the wrong word, but it is not, it's a good word. You know, it doesn't have to be perfect. I wouldn't be doing it perfect. I've not asked for perfection. If something is grossly wrong, we need to correct it.
Right.
That's why I don't tend to make significant comments. I usually don't comment, it's just because of that.
And that's what I usually comment on, if I see something that's just inaccurate or just totally missing the point. So I think it was fine for Mr. Don to bring up this question about the uncertainty, the lack of resolution of non-conforming, but it can be this way because we sidestepped it in the resolution. Otherwise, I think his suggestions here, I think we should adopt them. He's basically making vocabulary changes.
Right.
I wouldn't clarify what Ms. Bauer said because I don't think we can clarify it. We'd have to go back to the tape. I don't think her point was so particularly pertinent. So I'm happy with the changes that you've made, and I would move that we accept the minutes as amended by Mr. Don.
That's okay with me, I'll second that.
Okay, Jetta?
Mr. Don?
Yes.
Mr. Descalo?
Yes.
Mr. Parmigiano?
Yes.
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Mr. Adler?
Abstain.
And Mr. Shapiro?
Okay, so then we won't be meeting next Tuesday.
There's nothing.
That was the whole point of this
Oh,
exercise.
that's perfect, yeah.
Otherwise, we would have had to have met to approve the minutes. That's why we just went through that.
I'm loving it.
Trying to help you all out.
It's like Burger King.
Okay,
McDonald's.
and so we're going to go to November on Tuesday, first Tuesday in November, Election Day, and that will be singular. I've heard nothing about Seton Hall, nothing.
I heard they're going back to the HPC.
Going back to the Historical Preservation Committee.
They said they would. So, but for our purposes, we're just waiting to hear.
They haven't been there yet.
Right. From what I understand.
And I
Nor
don't,
have they submitted anything.
Not yet.
okay. Any other business that we
Pat-
needed to
Pat,
discuss?
can we get, if somebody's taking minutes, can we get copies?
Of HPCs?
No, of their minutes. If
Their
they're-
transcripts.
an applicant is, transcript.
You can ask for them, and they don't have to provide it. It's a private service.
Unless they sue us, then,
Unless there's an appeal, then they have to.
yeah. Then you don't want to see them.
Sometimes they have a service, and the service doesn't charge them to turn it into paper. But if you ask them to turn it into paper, it costs money. So they may or may not do that. I don't know.
No offense to the transcribing community, but I'd say, in my experience, at least 80% of the transcripted minutes that I've read have been heavily flawed. And so, I'm not sure why.
Tough job.
It is, yeah.
Tough job.
I mean, you got 10 keys or something. There's not even enough keys.
I don't want to say I'm old, but when I started practicing, they were doing
Shorthand?
transcript by shorthand.
Oh, shorthand.
You're old.
I didn't want to say.
Okay, anything else that we need to
I'm just
discuss?
as old, though.
Okay, so will our engineer or our planner need to weigh in on, I assume that this information from Singular will be sent to you all to take a look at also, right?
Yeah, I presume so. I mean, if they usually submit it to Jetta and she forwards it to us.
There may be nothing for you all to say if it's just perhaps relocating, and you use your judgment as to whether there's anything additionally that you need to add to your current report.
Right. Okay.
All right? Okay.
Very good.
Good evening.
So have you ever heard?